we're kind of expecting a lot of people who receive this information, a lot of pre-existing data competence, data knowledge, to see a stat, see a survey, see a table, and to be able to make sense of it. And I think that expectation that when we release data out into the world, it'll be received in the way we want it to, is missing a lot. And I think there's a real need for more kind of that education around data, around how to receive, how to engage, how to make sense, how to be critical in terms of how we make sense of numbers.